Hello, I'm Chris Smith and I'm joined by Leslie Riddick for this Helsinki Rap, our 10 minutes of what sparkled for us in a recent trip to the Finnish capital. We started with Waterfronts.
Well, actually, that was the main reason we were there, in fact, was to have a look at these amazing developments that Helsinki's making. Now, I mean, like any other city, and Helsinki is on a peninsula, so it's kind of surrounded by sea. It's had docks in the past, it's had industries come and go, but unlike other cities, it's not sitting just watching them disintegrate and watching themselves be ringed by empty, forlorn areas. The word design should crop up in this podcast a million times, because design is what the whole Finnish society seems to me to be about. They figure out what they've got in terms of assets, and let's face it, as the most remote country in the European Union, they've got some issues with what is their initial asset base, but by gum do they make the most of it. So about 20 years ago, was it 15 years ago, they realised that where they currently have the port was clogging up the area that could actually usefully be housing. So they moved their port, boom, like that, quite a long distance, I think, to the west. They then used the resulting areas that were freed up to put housing in. They built the housing by doing in open international design competitions. There's the design word again. And these are open to everyone. Now, the way it works well is this key difference between them and probably anywhere in Scotland, which is Helsinki Council owns between 70 and 80% of the land in Helsinki. They never gave up the land, so they're not just the planning authority, they're actually the owners. And this allows a unique thing where they can say, we want this area to be like this. And it's not just the kind of hopeful sound of a kind of planning authority. It's the fairly deterministic control of an owner.
And it spills out into things like, as we went to one of the beautiful restaurants, which was at a former abattoir.
Yes, they'd also decided in one area, and I mean, we would trill through the names of these, but actually so many of them are hard to pronounce. I'm sure I would just make a mess of it. Names like Tela Karanatana, no, see, I've already messed that one up, Kalasatama. Anyway, I'm looking at a map here with about 7 different points of development in this city. And you know, we get all excited in Dundee, they've got one waterfront project. These guys have got 5 waterfront projects working over a period of 20 years because they designed them in that way. The abattoir restaurant, yeah, that used to be an old abattoir. Now they've turned it into a restaurant. And this really is a groovy place to be. The aim of it is that they've got a leaflet here, and these people produce more books and leaflets. We came back with a heavier bag than we took with us, despite emptying it of quite a lot of presents. And this beautiful leaflet is talking about the residents of the abattoir. Now, they know how to tell a good story, these guys, because what they've done really is created a restaurant where everyone can have uncomplicated food, and at the centre of it, it's got pasta being made locally, I mean, right in that factory, so they're using stuff they're making on the premises. And they think that it's actually too boring. I asked at one point, do you source your food locally? And they sort of said, well, yes, but you know something, we kind of assume that's being done. That's not enough now as a hook on its own to get people into a restaurant. It needs more. Besides the table where they have salad, and by the way, this is how you get people to eat salad. It's free. The salad's free in any restaurant in Finland. Beside that, they've got the twin decks of a kind of, you know, for jamming session, for discos, for whatever you want in the corner. And it's events. All their venues, whether it's restaurants or libraries, the key thing that they keep stressing is events are on in them, events run by community people.
So like things like the restaurant day.
Well, this is extraordinary. I don't know why we didn't hear about this here, but in 2011, 3 guys were just getting so fed up with all the restrictions there were on setting up a restaurant that they just started fantasising about what would it be like if just for one day they were freed of them. What kind of places would you want to set up? Timo, the guy that we were talking to, was saying, you know, why isn't there a dog restaurant? Why isn't there a restaurant that specialises in baby food? Why aren't children really welcome rather than just tolerated in places? Why are there no Somali restaurants here when there's a large Somalian population? Why can't you sell fried grasshoppers in the middle of the night? Now, you may listen to that and think some of that's barking, but you know, barking's good. And barking is actually somebody else's staple food. Because the great thing about what they then did, where they just decided to have a day where they broke the rules, and the council did this extraordinary thing, it stepped back. It didn't pick anyone up, it didn't do what it could have done and just squash the whole thing dead. For 24 hours, it allowed, I think, first 45 restaurants were held on the first day, And the thing has escalated steadily ever since. There are now 55 countries in the world that observe Restaurant Day like this, because it sounds like absolute exuberance, where people, especially people from ethnic minorities, are able to communicate in a way that appeals to everybody, and perhaps it gives the proper restaurants a run for their money.
Yeah, and talking about communicating to everybody, we're fortunate enough to go along to something which, for us, is a concert hall, but it was called the Music Centre, to see a fantastic concert of Beethoven's Ninth.
Yeah, and that too, an amazing building. It actually has not just this massive, well, I was going to call it an amphitheatre, which is not kind of right, but it has that feel to it because it's in the round around the players. Its design is supposed to resemble the Finnish sauna, which of course is the classic thing that the Finns associate with holiness, funnily enough. And a number of times people said this, that the sauna to them is a holy space. Well, that's what they recreated for their concert hall. And through it, the steps that come jiggity-jaggedy down are illuminated by white lights, which give the sense of a waterfall or a very steep, fast-running river, which of course is part of the Finnish story too, and of logs tumbling down them, because Finland's whole wealth originally was built on timber. So anyway, that's just the building. The acoustics, though, are what really are tremendous, and they've gone through incredible detail to try and make it the best acoustics there are. Beneath there are also 5 other massive rooms which are custom designed. Rooms isn't the right word because they're like concert halls themselves, and each one is designed for the specific instrument that's housed in it. So we were able to take a peek in and look at the organ room, which had not just 1 but 3 massive organs in a huge area, and a rehearsal room. I mean, this should give the Finnish musicians absolutely their head. You get the sense of them absolutely revelling in all this space. And despite the fact they've been open for a year and a half, the theatre was absolutely full, and that's what, a 1,200-seater auditorium. So they're doing something right for the Finns. They respond massively to anything that's about creativity and music. And
it also flows through into things like the libraries. We were able to visit a couple of libraries, which were fantastic.
I know, and you see, here you go. You went to Helsinki, you visited some libraries, but it took them showing us till we understood how pivotal the libraries are for them. And I mean, the centenary of their country is coming up in 2017, and what are they doing to commemorate it? They're building a library. They're building an amazing library, which they hope will change all sorts of conceptions. Part of it will be a library, that's L-A-B. So again, the stress is on labour and on what you do in a place, not just the books that you read. They're going to have the building, which will sit facing their Parliament building and on a level to it, which they stress. It will also have, as an architectural feat, it will have a cloud around the top. Now I'm dying to see this, because all the designs we've been shown of this do show an actual cloud. How you manage to have a cloud built in as an architectural feature, I don't know. But they've got 3 levels to it as well, and they're hoping to attract all sorts of people in all sorts of different ways to use it as citizens. And this is their big thing as well, that the library underpins what it is to be a citizen. Now, you reflect on our situation where we have been closing libraries willy-nilly, and you reflect upon the fact that we're not actually citizens in the United Kingdom, and we don't even seem to value that function. But we had a tremendous trip around Valila Library, which is a beautifully designed, airy, spacious space, where they've also changed the way they clump things so that people can come in and pick up books not on the old system of how books are regulated. So in a way, they're a serious bunch of people who enjoy learning and enjoy design and events, and their libraries are the place it happens.
And it was also great to know that if you wanted to get out and about the place and see lots of it, not just get stuck in buildings. For a tourist, you've got to go on the tram tour.
Yeah, this is fabulous, because I'm actually trying to look for the wee leaflet here. It's just such a well-designed, again, wee thing. But this is like, just go and find the leaflet, which is the Tram 2 and 3 Helsinki sightseeing. Now, in any other city of the world, I think I'm right in saying you couldn't do this. You couldn't just go on the ordinary piece of public transport and see pretty well everything there is to see in a city. And yet the way this was constructed, because this tram line, I think, was constructed to facilitate the Olympics they had there, where was it, 1952, or I can't quite remember. So this takes you in a figure of 8 around everything there is to see. But nice people that they are, they've actually produced this leaflet that gives you an explanation of what you're passing. So try that one out. It is fabulous, and it again probably costs, if you were to take one trip, it costs about £1.50. Now again, if you can find a kind of almost self-guided tour of any city cheaper than that, I'd be astonished. But there again, just use the trams, because people sometimes get scared of the complex systems that there seem to be for buying tickets in other cities. But remember this, you can always pay the driver cash on a tram. So just get on and go, because the systems are terrific, and there's trams practically every 5 minutes.
And if everything is well designed, the design quarter is actually a great place to visit as well.
Yeah, the city is actually, I mean, it's very like, in some respects, Glasgow or Edinburgh. It has got that high tenemental feel, and it's got a few little hills in it, one of which is covered by this design quarter, which has got just hundreds of little businesses encouraged really to locate there. This is another curiosity of the city, because quite often we were being shown around by Heike and Douglas, an exiled Scot who's been there for over 20 years. And they would often say, this area is for this sort of person, or is for that kind of demographic. And it's quite stunning, because I don't think you could say that in any... Would we ever say that in any area in Scotland? This is for teenagers, or this is for students. We might say students because there would be student halls. But the planning is so particular that it kind of comes right down to this. So they were easily able to plan a design district. If you go to Helsinki, go to the Design Forum shop. This is a kind of mind blower, because they've got examples of work by all Finnish designers there. It's a shop front for them, so they shift products out of it and can test things without having to commit, to massive production lines. They can test and see what actually sells. And that shop has got more designers per head of the population for Finland than any other shop in the world, apparently, of designed goods. So it gives you a flavour. The Finns like things that are fitted to the circumstance, and they expect things to be like that. And it just made me realise, by gum, we could so do with that outlook.
And if you had to describe Helsinki in one word, it's modest.
It is. I mean, we had this conversation many times, and the Finns are famous, really, for being quite sort of reticent, slightly liking their space, going a bit bonkers when they've had a drink, all of which actually is the behaviour of shy people in many respects, liking their saunas and liking their summer houses at the weekend where they can get away from everybody. So the number of times we were told this was large. This is not just a story; it's a myth. They almost quite like this about themselves. And I did think, the Scots have got very similar tendencies, actually, but we don't really tend to kind of, put it up front. I think what they could do, though, is grasp a little bit more firmly the things that are theirs and showcase them, in a positive way. That's not to make them unfinished or unmodest, because I don't think anyone could ever do that. But for example, where's the sauna museum? That we visited shops that are complete sauna shops, where everything's there, from the birch twigs that you hit yourself with to the bespoke stuff for using in saunas. And yet there's nothing. If you came as a visitor, nowadays, of course, there's a sauna in every hotel, but the old days you used to be able to walk into public saunas. You still can in a couple of areas. But it's a kind of dying thing, because people have them in their own house. They say there are twice as many saunas as there are Finns. So that would be a great thing to do, though. I mean, tell the story. Where did it start? Why are you bonkers about this? What do you use? What things have happened in them? What's the biggest one? What's the smallest one? What's the most northern one? Does Santa have a sauna? Come on. There's plenty there. There's also their own history. I mean, famously, these guys went to war against the Red Army, and for a while they won in 1939-40. They then picked up again to try and retrieve territory lost to Russia behind the Germans, which was a big mistake. They went in behind Hitler, and they suffered as a country for that. They were made to pay reparations, much of which they did in kind, which created many of the industries, because they had to kind of stump up. So that too is an incredible story. And indeed, even the story of their independence. And yet, for some reason, all of that seems to be, the past is all forgotten, because they're focused so much on where they're going as a nation. Here we are about to celebrate, if that's the right word, battles like Bannockburn. Our gaze seems to turn constantly to the very dim and distant past. You've got to admire these guys that they look forward. But on the other hand, I think it would be a fabulous thing if they had a kind of sisu museum. Sisu is that word that means daring, resilience, courage to go forward. And that's one thing that the Finns are completely associated with. Well, spell it out. Give us examples of what that means. Create something really exciting. I think that would make a really unmissable destination in Helsinki.
But I have to say, so far, really enjoyed it. And thanks again to everybody from the city of Helsinki who managed to help us put this together.
Especially Nina and Casper.